Good evening, everybody. My name is Carl Dyson. I'll be doing my very best to chair this evening's proceedings. Great to see so many people here. Nice to see that we can all fit in a single room for a change as well. For those of you at the town council meeting, it was a little bit cramped in there for even those that did manage to put way in. So we're just going to run through a few things at the start before we're going to have some people speaking. Obviously, just to cover health and safety very quickly, in the event of the fire alarms going off, please leave the room by the exit at the back. The assembly point is actually in the playground. There isn't a fire drill scheduled for this evening, so if it does go, please make your way out. Just very quickly, I just wanted to cover some brief guidelines for tonight. Obviously, we've got lots of people here, and tempers and could run high. Can I just remind everybody to please let everybody speak. We'll be making time for everybody to voice their opinions at the end of the speakers, so please do bear that in mind when the people are speaking at the front. The purpose of this meeting is for not only for us to voice our concerns on what we think is going to happen to our estate, but also to hear from Councilor Brailsford for an update on what is going on their side of things. So this evening he will be speaking, and also David Taylor will be as well. So here's a brief agenda of what's going to happen this evening. Just going to run through some main points. There will be 4 of us from the estate speaking tonight, obviously together with David. And at the end, we will have an open forum and some questions, some time for questions for you to put to any of the people who've spoken this evening. Just to cover quite quickly, we did have a pre-meeting on Friday at the Crown. It was a good opportunity for everybody to get together and cover some of the things that we wanted to happen today. It was there that we agreed that the people that would like to speak today, and it's just a very good opportunity for people to kind of get a chance to speak in a smaller, more discreet environment. Firstly, I'd like to welcome Councilor Brailsford. I'd like to speak to you for 10 to 15 minutes.
Right, thank you, and thanks everybody for coming. This is not something I do as a hobby, actually, speaking to so many people, but I understand exactly where you're coming from, and I do say right at the beginning, I have a lot of sympathy for you. And the reason I do that, you might think, well, I would say that, wouldn't I? The reason I do that is because when Rutland Heights was granted planning permission, it was granted on appeal. It was granted by the planning inspectorate 20, 30 years ago. And one of the problems of that, because it was refused initially by South Kesteven at the time, when it went to the planning inspector on appeal by the developer, the planning inspectorate approved it, and all the 106 money that was going to be hopefully there for footpaths, pedestrian crossings and the like just got waved away. So you who've been there a long time finished up buying a house with no footpaths and no crossings, and that infuriated at the time the county council, because they funded that separately out of your council tax when it should have been funded by the developer, and you had to live for a long time before you got that pathway in. It's only in recent years you've got a footpath from Primrose Way down to Casterton Road where the traffic lights are. I think Rutland County Council put that crossing in, and the one near the slip road on the A1 was done about 3-4 years ago, and it took an awful lot of persuading to get that done by the county council, because I actually had to fall out with somebody to get it done, which is unfortunate, but that's what happens sometimes. So I do have sympathy, because you started in a bad situation because he was let down in many ways by the planning process, and here we are again 30 years later. So where are we at the moment? Well, it was about 2 months ago, a little bit longer, that Liz sat over there, emailed me with the when the draft local plan came out. I was in Scotland at the time, but I did pop in and see you shortly after, and we discussed certain issues at that time, and I just want to give you an update on what's happened on the problems that exist now. presently on Sydney Farm Lane, there's issues with enforcement. It's a 30-mile-an-hour road, no one enforces it, and there's an HGV ban in one direction, and it's not enforced. So, as a county council, we can issue what's called a traffic regulation order and make it 20, 30, 40, whatever, but the police enforce it. So we actually do the legislation, but we don't enforce it. So following on from comments that Liz made about HGVs and the speed, I actually arranged a meeting with Ian Martin, who's the new inspector in Stamford, and one of the results of that is that they've done a day, was it last week?
Yeah, it was Thursday.
Thursday last week. HGVs in Stamford is a major problem, not just on Sydney Farm Lane, and I believe you've done the town bridge last week.
Yeah, it's going to be ongoing.
And it's ongoing,
yes,
and you are going to do Sydney Farm Lane.
Yeah, that came up today. Can I just introduce myself? Because I've just disvoiced
Yes, yes.
I am stand-up. I don't like doing this either. And I thought it was going to be a room of about 4, so to apologise. I'm Jason. I'm the Bourne Town Centre PCSO. I'm covering rural Stamford for 4 months because you only have one PCSO at the moment. So I volunteered. I come over, help out as best I can. Don't like to whinge about resources, and we don't have any staff. But unfortunately, it's the case when it comes to Stamford. You are getting new ones in January, though, so that's good. Yeah, we've already started, as they just said. We've got some. We had the inspector, sergeant, PCSOs down on the bridge last week, and it's going to be planned different parts of the different days at different times to see what we can do. We did have some good results. We've spoken to a lot of companies, and they're the ones who come through the town quite regular, big companies. We've spoken to them, and they've been really supportive. Yeah, we will speak to the drivers, and we'll say it was a warning this time. Next time, obviously, it will be enforced. There's plenty of signages all the way from the A1 all the way through town, so there's no excuses. So we was just by, as you guys probably know, the Pizza Express bit. I was by the George, getting everyone to turn around into the down onto Station Road.
Cattle Market.
Yeah, that's well, no, yeah, basically up there.
Yeah.
So there's a nice big wide bit to turn them around, have a chat with them, speak to them. We don't just speak to the driver. We speak to the company. We also check the drivers fully check them for any criminal records, for instance, if they've got a driving licence, believe it or not. So they get a full check, as you would expect, and that's going to be ongoing. I have only just been brought onto this area, and Sydney Farm came up today talking to another PCSO, because he's the one who runs all the. If you contact us, he's the one who's replying via Facebook and Twitter and that. And Inspector Martin was available today, so I have not spoken to him. I got the email today at 2 o'clock to come here, so I'm a bit rabbit in the head, in the headlights. So, but yeah, it's the same in all towns. I'm born, I live in Bourne as well, I'm working there. It's the same kind of thing. Enforcement is something should be done. I'll be honest. I'd love to have the interceptors parked out up on the. It's not going to happen. We're going to do it as much as we can. The more we get information about I saw some photos today about the HGVs, and it'll be exactly the same. I'm putting a star next to Sydney Farm. I've emailed tonight to the inspector specifically about that road. I'm not 100% on my hands up. I don't know this estate as well as I could, because I've literally just come here, but it is something I'm going to be getting involved in by doing these days of actions, as we call them. So yeah, it is going to be an ongoing thing, but please don't feel that you can't just, you can speak to the council, it's great, but you can contact us via Facebook and Twitter and just give us information. And we will look at what we can do. If we can stop everybody who gives 35 and a 30, we try our best, but realistically we're not going to be able to do it, but we are going to work as best we can in them areas. Is that alright?
Yeah, fine. Yeah. The other issue that has been sort of resolved is there was cameras put on Sydney Farm Lane, I'm told, on the 22nd of September. I think they've been taken down today, and that photographs every vehicle going up there. So if it's an HGV, or it will identify it. If it's just a normal car, it will identify it. The results of that I won't get for another few weeks, I'm told, because the office have time to actually download it all and get the information. I'm not sure actually what that's going to tell me, but I think there's enough information out there already on HGVs to actually resolve that. With regard to speeding, which is an enforcement issue, I did ask, we have a mobile van, Lincolnshire County Council, with a camera out the back. It tends to go all over the county, and we don't say where it's going to go. and I've asked for it to go on Sydney Farm Lane. Sadly, I didn't get a particularly good response to that, but having spoken to Ian Martin, the inspector, I think it's something that can be done locally with PCSOs. They can get the handheld things and do it that way. So that's another option that's still got to be explored. So they were the issues that, Liz, I think you mentioned to me right at the outset, and that's where that's gone so far. The third thing I wanted to say, and I don't know if you've been circulated with emails, I just want to correct something, and I've mentioned it to the instigator of the emails. Several meetings are called where decision makers come together, and I'm down as a decision maker. I'm your councillor, I'm not a decision maker. Highway decisions are taken by highway officers. My role, as I see it, you might disagree, I try and facilitate and speak to people and bang heads together and say, well, you're saying that, but they're saying that. That's the reality. Have another look at it. It doesn't add up. That's what I try and do. One of the things I'm trying to do, which I'll come to later, is the project lead on this local plan is Burley Estates, and I met with Burley Estates last week, and he's looking at the big picture, and he wants to get the MPs involved. When I say the MPs, not just Nick Bowles, but John Hayes, who's a junior transport minister, or a transport minister, a road minister or something. And I'm arranging that to happen, and I've had a response back from Westminster that that meeting will take place. So that's my role, to get the people that make the decisions to meet. Because, you know, we have district councils, we have county councils, we have the police, we have all these different organisations, and they've all got a view, and they're all right, aren't they? Well, provided they all agree, fine. But also, it's important that you get your input into it as well. So, that I'm more of a facilitator. I'm definitely not a decision maker, because when it comes to highway issues, specifically highway issues, they're absolutely dictated by what's called the NPPF, National Planning Policy Framework, which is just, you know, a saying, and the numbers dictate what actually happens. So when they do the traffic impact assessments on Sydney Farm Lane, they will actually count the number of vehicles, and if it meets a certain criteria, then that happens, and if it doesn't, it won't happen. And that is the decision maker, the number of vehicles. I will just add this in, and people forgive me for mentioning that, but there was a councillor at Lincoln who made a highway decision and he did 3 years in prison, and that was Jim Speechley, if any of you can remember that. He actually wanted a highway next to a road, next to some land that he owned, and he never declared an interest. Now, I'm not a landowner, but it's ever since then, Lincolnshire County Council in particular have been absolutely clear that highway decisions are taken by highway officers, not by county councillors. So I'm sorry about that. I wish I was a decision maker, but I'm not. Quickly going on, because I know time's important. You know about South Kesteven's draft plan, 1,300 houses? How many of you know about Rutland County Council's local plan?
Regarding what? Yes.
Right. How many houses are Rutland County Council going to put on the border of Stamford?
800 on the quarry farm, remaining 162 in the Brailsford and
Well,
Rutland.
I've got a figure of 600.
In the quarry farm.
Yes.
And then the Brailsford right, 98.
There we are. Yeah. So that is something that I have a little bit of an issue with, because I'm not trying to knock anybody, and I'm not going to knock the district council. That's not the way we get things done. But when they put the draft plan out for 1,300, I wish they'd have mentioned the fact that there was going to be more than that. Now, the benefit of that, if there is a benefit, the money that 600 houses gets for infrastructure apparently is going to be passed over from Rutland to South Kesteven. So, although it's nearly 2,000 houses, instead of getting the funding for 1,300, we'll get the funding for 2,000. I don't know whether that's good news or bad, because in Grantham they've got the funding for 7,500 houses, and I don't really think that Stamford wants that many, but because they've got the funding for 7,500, they're going to get a new slip road onto the edge.
That's a retail market.
It's more than housing. It's more than housing, and there's lots of organisations involved in it, but I'm speaking just about Stamford. So we're looking at nearly 2,000 homes total. So that's the two local plans when they come together. And I say I wish that would have been put out into the public domain. I could talk about 106 agreements and SIL agreements, but I think it's quite technical. I prefer personally the SIL agreement because that means that money from housing can be used in an area. Through 106 it has to be used in or near the development. And the reason I say that is because I'm trying to get the MPs and Burley Estates to agree on a wider plan than Sydney Farm Lane. Sydney Farm Lane may well, I hate to say this, but it may well be the preferred option. However, I think there's an alternative. And what I would like to see is a link from Ryle Road to Uffington Road. There was a plan to do that many years ago, and about 3 years ago at Lincolnshire County Council it came to me with a request, would I object if that road, which never been built, was taken off the forward plan? Unfortunately I said yes, I would object to it, and I object to it perfectly honestly because I never knew what the future is. There didn't appear to be a great need for it at that time, but here we are, what, 2-3 years later, and to me the traffic that comes down Ryle Road that drives across town onto Sydney Farm Lane, whichever way it can, and it'll be much easier when these houses are built, potentially goes on Sydney Farm Lane. But if that traffic could go down Ryle Road, continue down onto Uffington Road, it could go out of Stamford in that direction towards Peterborough. Because the majority of people who work in Stamford work in Peterborough. I think it's 60% from a survey that's done. That's what I'm told anyway. I don't know if you agree with that, but a lot of people work in Peterborough who live in Stamford. They all go on to the A1. Now, I've seen the photographs, and I'll stop in a minute. I've seen the photographs of traffic backing up on Sydney Farm Lane. I was there on about the 12th or the 13th of September for about an hour in the morning with Richard Davis, who's the executive portfolio holder for highways at Lincolnshire. And Tuesday morning traffic was relatively light on the A1, and the maximum number of vehicles on Sydney Farm Lane, unfortunately, was 8. It just backed up to the crossing, and within a minute it was all clear. Now I've seen on other days it's right down Sydney Farm Lane. I've seen the photographs, and the problem is when traffic on the A1 slows down and it bunches up, traffic can't get out onto the slip road, so it backs up, and that really gives me an issue. I know that some of you want another slip road onto the A1, but it won't solve the problem of traffic backing up on the A1, and that is an issue I think that Highways England have got to address. And I am told by senior commissioning officers at County Council, senior planning officers, that the slip road onto the A1 will be a Highway England decision, but it will be funded by the developer. And quite honestly, there isn't enough houses to fund a new slip road. So it's really why I want to look at the Ryle Road situation, and that's where I want the MPs, and Burley Estates want to get the MPs involved, because they've got the clout to actually do it. And I'm not looking at the...
Sorry to interfere, David, but there's also the issue, you mentioned quite rightly about getting onto the A1 and the issues that it's having.
Yes.
But all that traffic that's just during the A1 to go southbound at 5 o'clock's coming all the way back. They're coming up from the 606, which currently now, without the expansion by 25%.
I've seen it. I've been in it.
It's a matter of time before it's an accident.
I've seen it, because the slip road isn't long enough on the A1. So traffic, turn that around in the morning, and I used to be a postman, some as you know, and I come up from Alton Southgate, terrible road, and as soon as you get to Wansford, you see traffic parked on the inside lane of the A1 trying to get onto the A47. And as soon as you raise that issue, I'm just going to put this, if you were the Minister of Transport and you've £100 million to spend, right, what would you do? Would you put a new slip road in at Stamford, or would you sort that problem out at the A47? I just want you to think on that, because that every day backs up as far as Wittering, sometimes as far as Burley, sometimes past Casterton. So putting another slip road in, as it presently stands, would not solve the situation of getting out of Sydney Farm Lane. But, you know, there we are. Now, I could go on.
Can I just mention something?
Yes, of course.
You said about Rutland. I've mentioned this before. I work at Hampton Cement.
Yeah.
I've worked at Hampton Cement there for nearly 25 years. Started off as a driver, now working works. One of our previous managers brought out a plan, and this plan is still there,
Yeah.
in black and white for everybody to see. And in future developments with the works, all our works traffic, which is 110 vehicles of our own,
Yeah.
in excess of 90 vehicles contract, will leave the works via the 606,
Yeah.
and I would say good 85 to 90% of our vehicles use the A1 to go south, because that's where our work is. And they will all use that slip road up there.
Yes.
That's more that comes out.
Yes.
That's not just in the morning, they clear off for the day and come back. Most of those vehicles do 2 loads a day.
They're down all day.
Right, so
Yeah.
you're probably looking at 350 vehicles twice a day, plus contractors bringing raw materials in and everybody else.
Yeah.
That's on top of how that junction is at the moment, without...
Without any more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, this, because it's not probably in the plan, because Rutland aren't going to release that, that is there, that is a blueprint, it's set. Any future developments, it's all coming out that way.
Since you mentioned that, Mr. Redmond, I want other people to speak, is one of the suggestions you put to me, and I don't know how serious this is, when you come in south down the A1, you come off at the 606, go to Oakham. Someone has suggested to me, who's involved in this project, I don't want to name them at the moment, is that they are considering requesting that Highways England don't allow you to come off at the 606 because it's dangerous coming out of Sydney Farm Lane turning right, and there's been so many accidents there.
But that doesn't
Now,
address the problem I just said.
it doesn't at
That
all.
suggests
No.
They're going to go south
Yes.
off the 606.
Yes.
So those vehicles then, as the gentleman just said, on an evening, all those vehicles coming back to the works will be on a live lane.
Well, my answer to that, I don't know if it would happen, and it's the only way I can think of doing it. You either extend that slip road another half a mile, which you might have to do, and if you don't do that, you're going to have serious accidents on the A1, people coming northbound in the evening. The only other solution is at the junction of Empingham Road and the slip road, you put traffic lights that clears it quickly, because traffic stops there, the traffic going up and down the 606, and you'd have to stop that traffic on the 606 and clear that slip road with sensors on the traffic lights. And again, that is something that the 106 monies could actually contribute towards, but again, that will be a Highways England decision. Yeah.
So I just thought I'd let you know.
Yeah,
that is a blueprint, it's there.
Yeah. Okay. I'm happy to come back at the end, but I'm aware of the time going on, and I've raised a few issues. I've got a few more, but I don't want to spend all you haven't come here to listen to me. So there's other. I want to listen to you, what you've got to say. So if you're happy, I'm going to sit down now. Yeah. Okay.
I think with speaking to David, I think David would like to address that.
Sorry, I'll just introduce myself first of all. My name's David Taylor. I'm a councillor at Stamford Town Council. Some of you have heard me speak at the Town Council. But my other role is as chairman of the Stamford Neighbourhood Plan. And I'll explain a little bit more about that later. So really my reason for being here is to explain to you where it's required, a little bit more about the local planning issues and how we in Stamford are trying to shape the town going forward and the growth in order to benefit Stamford. Rather than talk now, I think it might be better to listen to other issues that you have, and then probably David and I can both come back and respond to that.
Okay, thank you. Carl would like to talk. He's primarily going to talk about the concerns for the plans that we've been produced.
So let us start by looking at the overview of recent, current and planned developments by South West Devon and Rutland councils and how they impact on Sydney Farm Lane. Here we can see Sydney Farm Lane. The recent developments at Lambert's Place and Williamson Cliffside, which have already added in excess of 470 dwellings, and with a planned 10-hectare business park coming in. There's the new Rutland industrial units that have been added, and then we've heard that the Stamford North and East developments, which is planned to add another 1,287 and 162 houses respectively. The Rutland Quarry Farm will add a further 600. And plus, there's more industrial units. And Rutland also in the future. Admittedly, it's till 2036, but it's going to happen, I assume. Now, we can already see some congestion on the A606, the A1 slip, Sydney Farm Lane, coming from Lambert's Place, as it combines with traffic coming out of Oakham and Stamford. And remember that Lambert's Place is not fully developed. Now, taking this recent existing development into account and looking what will happen in the future with all the new developments that I've outlined, with the proposed east-west link, we can see that the enormous impact on the A606, A1, Sydney Farm Lane traffic there. Already it is both difficult to join and leave the A1 at the A606 junction, with regular tailbacks off Sydney Farm Lane in the morning, and dangerous tailbacks onto the A1 northbound carriageway as commuters return home on an evening. One is able to estimate any future traffic flow along Sydney Farm Lane by using the Jacobs Research commissioned by Links County Council in 2010. This research looked at the single impact of building 600 homes on the Quarry Farm Field site. You can note the thickness of the green line coming out from the proposed development meeting the Great Casterton Road opposite Arran Road. Now, if we project forward using the Jacobs model as a scaling factor for the existing developments currently affecting the roads around Sydney Farm Lane, and adding in all the 1,500 new homes and ignoring any traffic generated by the east-west road link, then we can go forward to suggest what this could mean for Sydney Farm Lane. Now, if you look at the thickness of those lines, there is a scaling in the bottom right-hand corner, but just as a matter of illustration, just look at the thickness of that the junction that's coming onto Arran Road, which I showed. If you look at that then, there's that proposed. Now, nobody knows where that road's going. Why, I wonder? Nobody said where it's going to exit onto the Great Casterton Road, but let's see what it will do. That's my suggestion about what would happen. Note what's happened to the A1 slip northbound, that thickness there, Sydney Farm Lane, and what's happened there. And now let's compare it to what in 2011 we were looking at Tinglon. Now that gives us some reference point in the absence of any other facts to suggest what that might mean for us on Sydney Farm Lane. Now that's using Links County Council's own data. Okay? And that's, do you want to talk about this? Right. Very quickly then, some of the things that we've got in here. So let's have a look to see if they're meeting their own planning objectives. I looked through the plans, and if you look at some of these sort of things that we've got here, there they are. From some of the basis of the SKD plan was via consultation, and this in part took the form of the Stamford survey. The results of this survey were fundamentally flawed, as it was biased by age and location, so it was irrelevant really. A lot of people in the north of Stamford, young households, didn't vote, didn't want to say anything, didn't express a viewpoint, and it was securely skewed towards the centre of Stamford town, the more expensive properties, and towards the Rutland direction. If you look at some of the other things that come out from this, the plan outlines Stamford's potential to capitalise on its links to the A1, particularly southbound to Peterborough and Cambridge. Now, the use of Sydney Farm Lane as the main point of access would seriously stifle this ambition. So where is that growth pole going to come from if you cannot access it through Sydney Farm Lane? The plan also talks about sustainable transport. By making Sydney Farm Lane an arterial route, it would downgrade it as a designated pedestrian and cycleway. So you're actually removing things which are now in place, which are good things, things that we do want to see. It talks of a comprehensive development. Where is this comprehension in its road planning? In the Rutland plan, it talks about consulting with SKDC. But why haven't the residents that abut either Rutland or SKDC been given an opportunity to appraise the implications of these combined plans, when both will impact on areas such as Sydney Farm Lane? Furthermore, Rutland talks about accruing social benefit. Increased pollution, congestion and traffic accidents are a social cost in anybody's book. If Rutland and SKDC are consulting, if Rutland and SKD are consulting, why not consult on a more future-proof link to the A1, saving the majority of residents on both Stamford and Castleton from increased traffic flow and all its ensuing problems? The plan mentions housing for everyone's needs. What are the needs of existing homeowners? And throughout the plan, numerous references are made about sustainable economic growth and development. And I'll show my colours now. As an economist, that is absolute rubbish. Because sustainable economic growth means handing on to the next generation a factor in down at least equal to that the current generation enjoy. And that is definitely not what you're handing on to the residents of Sydney Farm Lane. Pollution, congestion, greater risk of traffic accidents, and isolation from a wider community. In short, less welfare, less well-being, and it damages our children's and grandchildren's well-being. And I hate it. Thank you.
Really don't want to have to follow that. Deep breath. I was asked, I went to the pre-meeting on Friday, I was really grateful to hear about it, and we had obviously some general discussion, and I offered to talk a little bit about safety issues that concern us at the moment, but also going forward with any proposed plans. And firstly, I'd like to say, Dave, I'm really, really glad you're here, and you can see how important this is to people. And I would say there's probably you probably double this if plans start moving ahead. So, and I know what you're saying about not being a decision maker, and I understand that. But your role is, certainly I see it as my county councillor, is to be my voice on that council. So hopefully you can also tell us how we can help you to make sure our views are put across to the right people. So we will take any advice you have for people we need to be contacting, evidence we need to be gaining, whatever it is we need to do to make sure that some of these plans that we're concerned about, that we stand up to them. So talking about safety, it's been mentioned a few times. Has any consideration been made yet to the fact we have two schools, primary school at one end and a secondary school at the other? You go there, certain times of day, everybody's encouraged to walk or cycle. We have a lot of children, young people, walking and cycling down that road. As it stands at the moment, we already have concerns about their safety. I do appreciate your enforcement problems, but you've got heavy lorries speeding down that road on a road that is routinely used by children and young people, young parents, people in pushchairs, etc., that we're already concerned about. Any plans going forward, you talked about an impact assessment. How is that impact assessment going to actually capture the safety concerns that we have if that road is used even more? We've talked about speeding. We've talked about the heavy goods vehicles. What plans in future, given that as I understand it, that road, you mentioned also, you said it was only weight restricted one direction. My understanding is it's both directions. Both directions.
Okay.
But the signage at this end is poor, because the signage is 500 yards down that road. There is nothing at the road end.
It's down near the garden centre.
Yeah.
If you find your way through the trees, you might see it.
And you can't see it.
Yeah.
I've seen that one.
So actually, it's actually weight limited both ways. There shouldn't be heavy lorries on there at all, as far as I'm aware. I understand that's to do with the fact it's actually a town road. This is not supposed to be used as a rat run, as it's already being used, which you've seen before. situation here. How do we make sure that we're not in a situation where an already dangerous road becomes even more dangerous for our children walking to and from school, from people trying to walk into town, will end up completely cut off from Stamford because of the dangerous major road. So I need to know from you, and I'm sure other people need to know from you, how do we get some kind of assurance that before this planning starts, people are actually going to have an opportunity to put forward these concerns. The chap who spoke before me said all the good reasons, and a lot of things I was hoping to say, but he's already said them. That's fine. So I just need to know, I would like to know, how do we actually feed into this process to make sure, I mean at the moment it's dangerous, and it's a scary, scary thought of how dangerous it could become.
Do you want an answer now, or do you want me to come back at the end?
Up to you.
The crossing near the slip road, which is used mainly for children going to Malcolm Sargent, I say that was put in with a little bit of a fight, but it's there now, so we'll move on. The neighbourhood plan, I understand, stipulates that that crossing have lights on, so it stops traffic, so the young children going to coming to the school can actually cross safely. At the Casterton Road end, there is already traffic lights, and I would actually say on Casterton Road there are no traffic lights. I meant Casterton Road, to cross over to go down to the Casterton College. Correct, there's none of the, I think there was a picture shown up there earlier. One of the policies, that's the one that's damaged. That's the one that's damaged.
You can see,
Yeah.
because that's heavy lorries that can't actually make that corner as it is.
What's the signage for?
The signage, I think, for HGV's ban should be there.
Yeah. Yes.
That needs moving. Yeah, and then
Pedestrian crossing sign.
yeah, and then well, can you request it through me, and we'll see what we can do. That may, I'm not passing the buck, that may be in Rutland, I'm not sure, but even so, I hope the two authorities speak to one another. It would help, wouldn't it? There are plans to make the crossing at the other end lights on, and that could come from developer funding. But one of the concerns I have that Carl mentioned, if all that traffic goes down Sydney Farm Lane, the last thing I want to see, and I'll take your advice on that, I don't want to see Sydney Farm Lane widened. Because there's two things that will happen if you widen it. They'll take the HGV ban off, and they'll increase the speed limit to 40 miles an hour. Yeah, I would like to leave Sydney Farm Lane exactly as it is, and I would like to find an alternative route, which I alluded to earlier, which is out the other end of town.
But that requires enforcement.
To do what?
To stop people, HGVs going down there when they shouldn't be doing
We've got this guy's doing it. I've got every faith in him. I think actually they're warning at the moment, as he said, and if they start then taking further action, and the HGV driver is hitting a £60–70 hit, I think that will have an impact. But
what about further traffic calming measures? So speed bumps,
right,
chicanes,
right,
whatever it is, to make it really, really.
I don't like speed ramps and road restrictions. It's, well, Rutland have done it and had to take some of them out. It increases pollution for one thing, because traffic stops starting all the time, and I don't think it would help the residents hearing vehicles stopping, starting, stopping, starting. I mean, you get used to the traffic going up and down the A1. You get the traffic noise, it's just a constant. I mean, I used to live on Exeter Garden myself, and you hear it there, and you do get used to it. But when it's stopping and starting, it's irritating, and at 7 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock at night, it's the last thing you really want to hear, you know.
Why don't they tidy up that slip road at the end of this road here, or going on to here? The grass area is an utter disgrace. You can't see that way, you can't see that way, and it stops cars moving quicker.
Yeah. It does.
Yeah. All they've done is tied up a few trees.
Particularly if you want to turn right, and that's the dangerous, where the traffic's dangerous
it's
traffic.
Not that, it's looking to the left. You can't see round the bloody roundabout. Flattening.
Yeah.
If you're coming out of Sydney Farm Lane,
yeah,
and you want to turn right, you're looking for traffic coming down onto the A1.
Yeah.
You can't see it.
You can't see it.
Right.
So is that something that we could put forward?
Yeah, that is the slip road, the A1 and the slip road is a responsibility of Highways England. That is their responsibility. Now, there's been an ongoing debate between the district councils and Highways England on cleaning it up. Because we live in this society, don't we, of health and safety and risk assessment. And when they tried to do it previously, they closed one lane of the A1 to clean the verge. Yeah, seriously. I've seen that happen. And it's absolutely ludicrous that they do that. And they use it, the excuse, and it's probably a fair excuse, is to protect the safety of those picking up the litter. But I agree with that gentleman. If they flattened it, it wouldn't be a problem. That is something that we can make noises to Highways England. And I'm quite happy to give Carl and yourself all the contact details of the people you need to speak to, who are the decision makers, and I will support you in that. But I can't guarantee, I will say that again, I can't guarantee the outcome, but I will support you on that.
Just one final question to you is, where are we at the planning, in the planning process, in the planning situation,
right,
that we should actually be having our voice heard
now?
About, right.
Absolutely now. I think you was told at the town council, don't worry about it, no decision till March. March is too late. You're not jumping the gun. Now is the time to be doing it. Now's the time to be writing to people, and absolutely. Now.
And as I said, we'll take your advice as to how we go about doing that and how we help you to make sure you're standing up there and actually fighting.
You need to get the communication to the right person, yeah. Not number 2 or number 3 in the chain, but to the number 1. And what you need to do, in my opinion, is you need to get them to come and stand where I am and explain why you are wrong, because that's what they'll try and tell you. What Carl was saying. I certainly can. Yeah, in fact, I was promised tonight that there'd be a colleague of mine from Lincolnshire come, but he hasn't come. Pardon? Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah. 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 Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Could I just pick up specifically on the point you've raised about how you get involved? The first thing you do, you should do, I would suggest, is to make your concerns made known to SKDC. I wrote to a number of you who wrote in turn to me to advise you on those things I thought you should do. Without any doubt, at this point in time, the first people you should contact are the planning officers at SKDC. Some of you who were at the town hall will have heard this before, but we have also, as Stamford First, the Neighbourhood Planning Forum, we've also taken this issue up with both Rutland and also with South Kesteven District Council. As the town council, we are a consultee to the planning issues that affect Stamford. As part of the consultation that SKDC have had, we have already responded with our concerns about Sydney Farm Lane.
Can we see that response?
I'm going to read it out to you, because then you get it verbatim, but it's certainly something I'm happy to share with everyone. So I'll kind of start with the second point first. And this isn't being defeatist. We're not saying that Sydney Farm Lane will be chosen. But my advice, and this is from someone who spent an awful lot of time campaigning for inappropriate development in Stamford successfully, please take this advice. So contact SKDC. In our submission, we have said, should it be determined that the east-west link road is routed via Sydney Farm Lane in order to access the A1, it should be ensured that the appropriate developer-funded provision is made to minimise the impact of additional traffic along this route. These measures should be determined in consultation with the residents. You know far better than highways officers, far better than I, what you believe would be the best things to do. Aided and supported and guided by highways officers, probably, but between you or amongst your group, there are people with clearly a more intimate knowledge with the issues. This goes on. These measures should be determined in consultation with residents, with the objective of improving accessibility to and from Rutland Heights, for cars, cyclists and pedestrians alike. This should include a safe pedestrian and cycle route for children attending Malcolm Sargent School and Casterton Community College, and for residents to enjoy connectivity to Rutland Heights with a wider town. So that's a policy that's going into the neighbourhood plan, and that was our response to SKDC that will now be considered by SKDC when they look at all of the responses they've had to the neighbourhood plan. So please do take up the option now of talking to them about the things that you would like to see happen should that route be chosen.
We'd like to talk about other options rather than that being the only option.
I totally understand that, and now I'm going to come on to the other point. So, as I say, I'm not suggesting that's been predetermined, but I do advise you to start thinking now, just in case that happens. Start thinking now about the things you would like to see changed, because it is possible, of course, that Sydney Farm Lane will be chosen. Going back to the bigger issue, is that the right route? Every planning decision is made on is evidence-based, has to be evidence-based. And again, I say this on the basis of fighting planning applications. Passion and commitment, and it doesn't hold up. Evidence holds up. So there is a traffic study being undertaken. One has already been undertaken, but there is another one being undertaken now by Lincolnshire County Council. That will monitor traffic all over Stamford, not just on Sydney Farm Lane, not just around there, but all over Stamford. And on the basis of that modelling, a number of routes could be determined, and they will be assessed in terms of their viability and deliverability. So what do I mean by deliverability? It could be the case that lots of different routes are looked at, and some simply, these are the facts of life where highways are concerned. Deliverability means they must be affordable as well. And bear in mind that the majority of the funding for roads, not necessarily all of it, but a lot of it comes from developer funding. They're spending £81 million in Grantham on a relief road, but there are 7,500 houses being built. And so there's developer funding and some other parties putting money into that. So coming back to what I was saying, routes have to be deliverable. They have to be fundable. So this study will enable highways officers who understand these things to look at the traffic volumes, and on the basis of that determine what are viable options, and then to make recommendations on that basis. What I've done since I saw you at the town hall is I've asked for a meeting, which is now in the diary. I've asked for a meeting of the leader of SKDC, who happens to be a councillor in Stamford, for a representative of Burley. David will be there. We also hope that another senior highways officer will be there, and one or two other parties as well. And mine and David's challenge to them is to say, you must demonstrate that you have looked at all of the viable options. That has to happen. That's our challenge to them, and that's our job as your local councillors to do that. So that meeting's in the diary now, and we will make that challenge, and at the appropriate time we will come back to you and say what the outcome of that will be. But this study will take time, the data will take time to gather, but as I said at the Town Council, no decisions have been made yet.
One of the pleas from everybody will be for transparency, and that means that you said at the appropriate time is whenever that information is available.
The appropriate time is when they've identified what the options are, and at that point in time, as I've already said to them, there must be a period of consultation, and that consultation must include all of the residents who have an interest. So I am certain that through that process you will get the opportunity to feed back into the process, just as you have with the SKDC local plan. I think that's all I had to add, unless, once again, are questions.
Could I just say, in your submission to SKDC,
Yeah.
it seems to be totally concentrated on the residents of Rutland Heights. There's no mention of the residents of Forest Garden, Brailsford or Cedarburg in that submission. With regards to Rutland Meeting being extra nights.
No, the comments are all made, well, the comments are made specifically in relation to Sydney Farm Lane, but of course, you know, all of those people could be affected, and they should all be part.
The other side, our side of the earth.
No, not specifically, but you are affected. That, you know, the issue is Sydney Farm Lane, whichever side of it you are. So, so I didn't see any need that we needed to mention specific roads. Obviously, SKDC will know that you're all affected.
So we've also managed to, quite, thank you very much for doing it, but mentioning the health and safety part of it. We haven't actually managed to mention the environmental impact on what it's going to cause to all of us lives. So where does that stand in relation to money? So what I'm saying is when you hold these meetings with states, where does the environmental impact coincide with the money aspect? For example, the cost of air. It costs us a lot, but it doesn't cost them a lot. And I would appreciate if you could just go back and mention the environmental impact
Yes.
that this road calls for.
Yes, I'm sure that will all be part of any discussions. It is clearly wider than just, you know, that's the impact of extra traffic flow, we understand.
And does that count as evidence? You mentioned evidence.
Yes, yeah.
So how do you measure the environmental impact in terms of evidence?
So when I talk about, in relation...
That's got to be one of our arguments.
Yes, of course, I understand that, When I talk about evidence, at this point in time, I'm talking just about the evidence that needs to be gathered in order to determine the optimum route. In terms of the environmental impact, that I'm sure will be considered, but I can't say any more than that. We're just trying at the moment, you know, it's kind of one step at a time. At the moment, we're just trying to ensure that they look at all the viable options for where the route goes.
You keep bringing up the word Burley. Well, years ago, in the 90s, there was 3 options for the Stamford bypass. One of them was run down the length of Burley Wall to Barnet, cross the River Welland and join the A16.
Yeah.
But the minute you get Burley involved, we seem to hit an obstacle, because they seem to have more clout as Burley estates than what any of these housing estates will ever have.
Okay.
The Diana Garden Memorial was placed where it was specifically to prevent bypass.
Yeah.
We know that, we're not daft. So why do we have to get involved with Burley? What's Burley got to do with this end of town?
What?
Because I'll tell you why, because they don't want it in
if
there.
you'll allow me to, I'll respond to comments. So, in this town, historically, Burley has had a bad taste. I don't understand all of the history of that, but we have to move on. As a neighbourhood planning group, we have had a lot to do with Burley. Why are Burley involved in this? Because the majority of the land on the north of Stamford that will be developed is Burley's land. Burley have a genuine interest in the future of this town for obvious reasons, and that's part of it. And they are working with the other landowners to master plan that at their cost, the whole development. We need to change. My suggestion: we need to change this mindset about Burley, and I'll come back to that again in a minute. Burley have the vested interest of this town and the residents upmost in their mind. And whereas a few years ago they would have been selling land to the highest bidder and not caring about how that land is developed, that attitude, that mindset has changed completely. And I'm in regular contact with Burley, David's in regular contact with Burley, and David would back me up on this. They have the interest of this town at the heart of everything they do, and are already demonstrating that, and will demonstrate it further. They are master planning the whole of the northern development. What do I mean by master planning? What's happened in Stamford previously is that development has been piecemeal. We've had Rutland Heights, we've had Exeter Park, we've had other areas before my time in Stamford that have been developed piecemeal. There's no coherence to it, there's no overview of what it looks like or what it should like. Burley are master planning all of that, and that means the development we get to the north of Stamford will be done with consideration to the look of it, the infrastructure that's put in, not just roads, but schools, doctors' surgeries, sports facilities. All of that is going into their planning. And Burley will be holding their own consultation on their plans, and all residents, yourselves and other residents in Stamford, will have the opportunity to see what's being proposed and feed into that process as well. So please, I believe they will be ready early part of next year, January or February. There's an immense amount of work going on, which has been going on now for about 18 months to 2 years. But they will be sharing that with residents, and you will have the opportunity to look at what's proposed and feed your view in. So I would urge you to look beyond the Burley of the past and consider how Burley is working now, going forward in a positive way to help the town. Yes, this gentleman down here will say it's all down to this. Development is a lot about this, but they're not simply going for the highest revenue earning solutions. They are investing enormously to try to benefit the town and making less money as a consequence.
It'd be great if they could change their opinions on the fact that they're just...
Well, all I would ask is give them a chance, because I see it firsthand and I know that to be the case. David has as well.
How many households would live in that side of town? It's mainly industry. So if a road went across there...
Sorry, when you say it's mainly industry, what do you mean?
FH Gilbert, which is no longer there, Mole, the old Blackstone site. If the road went across there and then joined the A1 to the south or to the east of Burley, the environmental impact on households, children, health and safety and everything else would be a problem, because you're taking it away from the housing infrastructure and putting it in industrial side. That was the original plan in 1993, which FH Gilbert had drew up, and I was working for him at the time, and it was laid out in black and white. And the only reason it didn't get accepted because of the three plans, nobody would come up with a solid, we want that. Everybody had their own opinions on it, so the whole thing got squashed. But the Burley Wall was one of them that was the preferred option. And Burley put the block on it because they didn't want the road going down the back, across the River Welland and joining the A16. And then you could link the A16 to the Royal Road and from the estate. But that magic word kept popping up then, because it has done tonight with these people in Burley. We feel that we've ruled by Burley.
I'm going to defend Burley a little bit here, because I actually know David Pennell, who's the director of the Burley estate, extremely well, and he's a very genuine man. And I think if he's involved in the planning, I certainly feel a bit more comfortable about what's going on.
But don't you feel he's only got Burley's interest at heart?
Not knowing the guy. I mean, of course, his role is actually a Burley role. But I'm now believing what you said earlier on about the role that he has.
If you know David, as I know David, David knows David, then we need to. Then he has the best interest of Stamford at heart. Do they want the road to go through Burley? No. Will that change? No, it won't. Let's just face it to the fact that that's going to happen.
Not in my backyard, but you're welcome to it.
Well, would you like a road running through?
This is why we're all here. We're here because of that.
Sorry. Again, you didn't let me finish.
But we need a compromise. This is it.
Okay. So I don't think I've got anything more to add unless there are any questions.
What you very kindly read out was the Stamford Town Council response that went to South Stephen. Was that as a consequence of the meeting at the Town Hall? Was it done after the meeting at the Town Hall?
No, it was done before the meeting at the Town Court. Before then, but we were aware of your concerns even before you came to the Town Hall. And in any case, it's what we want. We want there to be all options to be looked at. So, it obviously not just. So yes, the meeting at the Town Hall reinforced the strength of your feeling, but that was already there.
Can I ask you a very simple question? As a precursor to the statement that you made, did you say that the City Farm Lane route would be
don't think, because we don't know, that there is no route, you know that, there is no defined route. Yes, there's a strong argument, there will be a strong argument for it being Sydney Farm Lane, but we as Stamford Town Councillors, and me in my role with the neighbourhood plan, we have to look at the best solution for Stamford. And that might include...
What are the routes available?
We don't know, because this is what I'm saying. It comes back to the evidence. We can't predict what the other routes will be. We might all have ideas on where the other routes might be, but we can't say what they are yet. When we get the evidence, when that evidence is gathered, and when people who know about highways can look at the various routes, then we'll be able to comment on that. So the answer is we didn't. The answer, yeah.
This idea of using Sydney Farm Lane, the gentleman that started the whole thing on David, it's not a new idea. I was here 20 years ago when it was put forward. Quite rightly, I'm not sure who stopped it, but someone stopped it, and the things that we have in place are now there. I think the road is fine as it is, apart from the things we've got in place are not kept up to. That's a separate issue. What I can't understand is why, when you stand there and say, well, it's not an idea, but it might be an idea, why someone, somewhere, is not saying it cannot be an idea because we've done this 17 years ago. It wasn't the correct idea then. It can't be put forward now. And secondly, the other thing I want to make clear, Sydney Farm Lane, for the residents of Rutland Heights, their only way on and off the state means they have to use that lane. You can't get to Stamford by foot or by car any other way. That is unique to us, and you should be putting that forward as the one reason why it shouldn't change. Because any other road, Southern Way, Arran Road, I could go on, you can use other exits apart from the main through road to get somewhere else. We can't.
I understand that. I understand that.
We'll make time after everybody's had a chance to speak for people to ask questions. So can we just move things along a bit? I'll be very brief here. As you might have seen if you're a member of the Rutland Heights Community Association Facebook group, I've been out doing my very best to highlight the issues and problems caused by heavy goods vehicles, overweight vehicles using Sydney Farm Lane. Well, basically flouting the law as such. So on a number of occasions I've been out with my dash cam following vehicles completely through up Castleton Road into the 7.5 ton zone, following them, as you can see, all the way out onto the A1. There is no excuse that they've stopped. It is fact. Now all this evidence was provided to the police, which was done through Jay, which is one of your...
sorry? Jay?
Jay, yeah, one of your colleagues, which was brilliant. Now, we were promised a day of action, which was supposed to be happening, September. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. No, it did. Yeah, it did. So, I mean, my biggest issue is that until I was actually ready to put this evidence together, nothing had happened. Nothing at all. I've been in correspondence with Councilor Steve Carroll, who's been campaigning for action to be taken. Now, he says he's been campaigning for 2 years. Nothing has happened. So it took some guy in a car with a dash cam collating evidence showing... Oh, where are we? Hold on. There we go, that one there. Obviously, in this, as you can, I don't know if you can see there, yeah, there is a child there within feet of an overweight vehicle on Sydney Farm Lane. Now, it took that image.
And on the left, that same vehicle is mounting the curb in exactly the same place as that child walking the previous day.
Now, it took several emails, and it actually took our town councillor, David, to have the parish council email the police to have something moving on this. Now, why did it take so much? All of the 7.5 ton weight limit in Stamford should be policed. It should be enforced. I had the same conversation with Jay, and it is all put down to lack of resources.
And interesting, I followed the likes of all 18-ton vehicles to this meeting. That was one of the ones in City Farm Lane.
So, and obviously, as was mentioned today, a traffic monitoring box was removed this morning from City Farm Lane. Now, I actually spoke to John White, who was the gentleman that actually arranged for this box to be installed, and he is part of the Lincolnshire Road Safety Partnership. Now, speaking to him in length, that box was put in at the request of the parish council. Now, I am seeking to see why that box was put there, because I think we really do need to start joining up what's going on there. I've also, under the Freedom of Information Act, I've also requested police actions that have taken place in the past 3 years in Stamford, number of convictions, and how many vehicles I'm stopping. Because I put it to everybody here that nobody has ever done anything to stop overweight vehicles in Stamford. Why should it be?
Sorry, I'll let you finish.
Sorry, yeah. Why should it be that this issue has now caused it to come out? Had we not been the ones standing here, nothing would be happening to police this, and our children would be the ones that are in danger.
For those that don't know me, and I'm sure there's quite a few faces that don't, I'm Dave Dawson. I'm actually your stand-up. I'm actually one of your ward councillors in Stamford Town Council. I've been friends with our team for quite a long time as well. As soon as I was made aware of the situation regarding the proposed relief program, it might impact you guys, I opened up conversations on the team directly. I've spoken to a few of the residents as well. So if anyone wants to contact me, I can be contacted through the town hall, or I can be contacted by Carl. With regards to the traffic monitoring device, I know that when you spoke to the person who said that it was the parish council that requested that, I think that information is wrong. I think it's actually a request of David Brailsford from the county council. So that's why that was up. It wasn't anything to do with the parish council. Just as a point of clarification. Okay.
Carl?
Yes.
One of the things that Dave picked up about the limiting sign, I've walked that route on yesterday morning, and you can walk from one end to the other, and all the signage, if you go from Castle Road through to the A1, they're not there, they're hidden with trees, bushes, and as David said, the 7.5-ton one wants to be this side at the back end of that forest to get the stop them, so that they can see as soon as they turn in. There's a restriction. Some of the signs have got green mildew and you can't read them. The actual 30-mile limit sign that's supposed to flash on, sometimes does, sometimes doesn't, because it's obstrued by some of the bushes. But I think the sensor is not picking up the true speed. And at the far end, some of the signs, again, they're faded so much that anybody coming off the A1 would need to see them. So, you know, there is a point there for the lady said about the safety bits that we need to be installed. We need somebody to go and look at the signage and alter it.
Well, before I actually took it upon myself to video the traffic, I actually went down to the bottom of Castle Road and actually cut the trees back around the 7.5-ton limit sign, just because when I was filming, you could hardly see them. So, I mean, and the council at this point seem very unwilling to maintain any of the signage in City Farm Lane, and at the end of the day, to the detriment of our children's safety. Right, that's really quickly.
Can I just come back on one thing,
Yep.
just for clarification? That flashing sign, when it was put up on the wrong side of the road.
Yeah, I spoke to council tunnel, but
Yeah. And I actually said to the officer at the time, who's now retired, why have you put it that side of the road, in the middle of the trees? And I didn't get he wasn't very happy with me, but it needed to be the other side of the road. That's lack of thought that gone into it. I don't know whether they was told to put it there, but if they were, they should have queried it and said, actually, boss, this is the wrong side of the road. It needed to go the other side of the road.
Could you let us know who it is we need to speak to?
He's retired, the gentleman that did it. Yeah. I met him in IKEA in Nottingham last week, the first time I've seen him since he retired. But he's been replaced by Rowan Smith. Rowan Smith is the area highway manager. An area highway manager might seem a senior position, but it's actually not in the grand scheme of things. But it's a sign that Rowan Smith and Lincolnshire Road Safety Partnership together should be able to move. The sign's already there, the cable goes across the road, all they've got to do is dig a hole, take the thing out and put it that side of the road. It's as simple as that.
Would they also be the ones responsible for maintaining the other signage that's there that we indicated that is obscure and dirty?
Well, the signage needs moving anyway, doesn't it? Because the signage is in an inappropriate place. So we need new signage going up. And if it wasn't put in trees, it wouldn't be green, would it? You know, it's only green because there's leaves on it all the time, and it goes green and you don't see it. Yeah.
There's a couple of HGV drives in it. The people that are breaking the law on the HGV thing, they know it's a 7.5 weight limit because there's regular routes.
Yeah, but as a police officer trying to enforce it, the guy says, well, where's the sign? And so it's down by the garden centre. You know, and they know it's there, don't get me wrong, but it's difficult for these chaps here to enforce it and give a notice if that is the case. They've got a reasonable argument.
Lorry drivers, word gets around the whole stop using it.
That's exactly what I said at the start, is we're going straight to the companies, and there's an old phrase, the prevention's better than cure. It's kind of what we're going at. We're trying to get to the employers, and that's where we're going. We had some good results last week straight away, and that's definitely a path we're going to follow.
PCO at Corby use Sydney Farm Lane every week. Every single week.
Right.
Same lorry, same route.
The problem with Sydney Farm Lane is not just the 7.5 tonne weight limit, because it's 7.5 tonne weight limit loading only. So when you see trucks there, Arctics with hay bales on the back, they are legally using that road to access the field to get loaded with hay to take it back to the A1. But there's a lot of trucks you see out there using, was it Mainlands? Yeah. Companies like that, nights of all, unless they've done delivered a wardrobe to somebody's house on the estate, they're all breaking the law.
That product that Mainlands is carrying has come out of Creek and Quarry.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mainlands are a Leicester-based company, and that stuff all goes back towards Leicester.
Yeah.
Right, just a couple of things I want to bring up. No. Article in Stamford Living, September. It's basically about Stamford 50 years conservation. So I wanted to read this last paragraph to everybody, because I think it sums up how we all feel about Stamford. And it's not just about Sydney Farm Lane, but it's about Stamford as a town. So it says here, over the years, Stamford has benefited greatly from becoming a conservation town. Not just individual buildings, but street views have been preserved and new buildings inserted sympathetically. Visitors continue to appreciate the finest stone town in England. Without vigilance, however, much could be lost. Proximity to Peterborough has resulted in a large increase in population and housing development on greenfield sites. As a result, although the historic centre continues to be monitored, its infrastructure is suffering, roads are unsuitable for the volume of traffic, and car parks are inadequate, deterring visitors. Developers are required to pay a charge to the council, and in these days of austerity, they are not surprisingly sometimes more concerned about cash than heritage. Perhaps a campaign for the future by someone as enlightened as Dr. Fennell would be a good idea. Of course, he was a chap who got Stamford Conservation status 50 years ago. Everyone's been talking about roads and specifically Sydney Farm Road, but I have a concern about the town itself. I've lived here for 25 years now, and it's becoming more and more increasingly difficult to get into the town, find somewhere to park and shop. And as it stands at the moment, I've seen lots of shops boarded up and are for sale. Creative development that's going to increase the population of Stamford by 25%. Where does that leave schools, hospitals, doctors, and shopping in the town centre? And throw on top of that the fact that it is actually a spot where visitors, tourists, that's the word, hotspots, it's going to be a flipping nightmare. So are there plans within this whole development for additional doctor surgeries and doctors? My doctor's surgery just closed down, little surgery, patient list of 3,000. We used to have a walk-in clinic. You wouldn't be on the phone for more than 15, 20 seconds before you got an answer on an appointment, and you could go to the open clinic Monday to Thursday. We've all now had to move to Sheep Market or St Mary's, and interestingly, only 3 or 4 days ago, I had to ring the surgery, and I was on hold for 10 minutes before anybody answered the phone. Now let's just chuck another 5,000 people into the fold, and it's not going to be 20 minutes. I mean, this is all about not just a housing development, it's about everybody in Stamford is going to suffer. Their quality of life is going to suffer from this if it's not done correctly. And I want to know where we're all going to park.
Can I just respond to that? Because this is exactly what the neighbourhood plan is about. So in sort of the planning hierarchy, there's the government's housing policy at the top. Beneath that comes the local plan. And as a consequence of the 2011 Locality Act, there is now, at the lowest level, there are neighbourhood plans.
Excuse me,
So,
can I just put in there, I think we're missing the point. You're going about telling us about these levies. One of the things that you're missing, you're not asking the community what they want.
Right, well, you're wrong, I'm afraid.
I'm not. Because you would have taken into consideration about Sydney Farm Lane before you even started talking about it.
Can I just finish trying to answer this gentleman's question? Because he's concerned, as I am concerned, and that's why I've spent the last 2 years of my life dedicating time to developing a neighbourhood plan from Stamford to Stamford. Stamford is a wonderful place. It needs protecting. It needs the infrastructure required for growth. It needs new roads. It needs more doctor surgeries. It needs schools. It needs a whole host of things, and they're all in our thinking. The neighbourhood plan was consulted on at the end of last year. Every single household in Stamford got a copy of a questionnaire. The whole ethos of neighbourhood planning is it has to engage and consult with the community, and that's exactly what we've done. The neighbourhood plan draft, on the basis of the evidence that was gathered, not just from residents but also from businesses as well, that plan is now being drafted, and it will go to consultation, and everyone in Stamford will have the opportunity to look at that plan, determine what they like about it, what they don't like about it, feedback that, and that will be responded to. And ultimately, that plan will be the subject of a referendum. And before someone raises what happened on Red Lion Square 15 or 10 years ago, or whatever it was, that will mean something to some of you, this referendum is a legally binding referendum. 50%, 1% vote in favour, 49% is accepted. The point is, it is consulted on, it has been, we spent 2 years doing that, you will be further consulted, and as a result you'll have a neighbourhood plan in Stamford. Until now, until we started on this process, we as residents in Stamford have very little say over what happens in our town, and that I was determined to do, and I would ask for your support in supporting the neighbourhood plan, which you will see. So the draft, we're writing the draft now. All of the issues that you raise are part of that plan. So heritage and the environment, roads, infrastructure, protecting green space, it's all in the plan. So we hope that that will be drafted before Christmas, and then it has to go through an independent assessment process by a planning inspector, and then subject to that it goes to referendum. But you'll see something in the Mercury in the next few weeks just to say these are the things that are coming through, these are the themes that are coming through, and critical to that is the roads infrastructure, and that's where obviously this issue comes in.
So with the neighbourhood plan then, I assume your suggestion would be suggesting that Sydney Farm Lane would not be a viable route then?
No, that's not true.
Why then? Would be my question.
Because we don't know. I can't say it's the right route or it's the wrong
I'm
route.
not saying it's the right route, I'm just saying that you don't
No.
believe as we do that it is not the correct route to use then.
What
You're
we
not going to put it in your words, we do not suggest that Sydney Farm in any shape or form is used as any part of the leak relief or whatever road you want to call it.
no, that's not in the plan. What the plan says,
Why, though?
what the plan says is that we want all options. So within this plan, we're trying to represent the needs of all of Stamford. They've told us what they are. Within this, what?
Sorry, I'm not getting at you, but my point is,
No,
you're all
what?
sitting here saying you
Yes.
don't want something.
No,
I
of
don't
course.
feel you're engaging with that because you're not actually.
We are
putting that
engaging with
forward.
it because we have put a policy in there which says we have to look at all the viable options.
But it's not viable.
It
Why,
may be
why,
too
why
late.
do you assume it's viable? That's what I can't get my head on. Why do you assume that that is viable?
I'm not saying it is. I'm saying at the moment, no one has gathered the evidence to determine what's the most viable way of getting the traffic away from the new development.
Shouldn't that come before you even talk about building and all that? Because how is all that traffic to build
Yes.
the house
Yeah.
going to get there if
Yeah.
you haven't got the infrastructure first?
We're saying that infrastructure has to be in place. What we can't say at the moment and what we can't make any recommendations on is what's the best route because we don't have the evidence. As I said earlier on, it all has to be evidence-based.
Saying which is the best route, which means there's more than one route, Sydney Farm Lane, or where is the
Yeah.
other route considering?
I don't know.
Well, you seem to know a lot about the
No.
Sydney Farm Lane one, but not the other one.
We are.
That's the way it's come across to me.
As a town council, we've been focused on Sydney Farm Lane, but no route has actually been planned at all yet. We've not seen any roads planned.
No. Please believe me. You know, we're here because we want to help. We want to listen. We want to address your concerns and needs. No route has yet been determined. The only thing that currently is in the neighbourhood plan, is that a roads infrastructure has to be put in place in order to mitigate the additional traffic and get the additional traffic away from that development. No further planning or thought has yet gone into that because these things have to be done in stages. We can't
Get
plan.
traffic away from the new development.
That's
So what about the development that exists now then? Are you going to get the traffic away from us?
we will identify the best route, the best options to do that. Well, David knows.
Sorry, yeah. I think you're forgetting that right at the outset I said that I wanted to look further wider than Sydney Farm Lane as an option. Now a lot of the traffic, possibly, and I've not seen the figures, but you're going to put 2,000 houses to the east of Stamford, north-east of Stamford, halfway between the A1 and Uppington Road, roughly. Ryle Road's in between, right?
People aren't going to go through town.
People, no, they're not. And why aren't they?
They might do if they get frustrated.
Why aren't they? They aren't going to Tallington because of the crossing.
They're not going to go down the A15 either because that's already a nightmare getting into.
Well, I know that road and it's nose to tail most mornings. Actually, I go up through Bourne, Market Deep in Bourne, up to Sleaford. It's not the best road, is it? But a lot of people who live in Stamford, I said earlier, work in Peterborough, and if you work in that north end of Peterborough, the quickest way, even in the rush hour, is to go out. What we need is a bridge at Tallington. Now,
No good building your road, as you just mentioned, because it'll just exasperate the Tallington crossing.
well, exactly. Now that's why, I mean, Burley Estates have been mentioned in not too friendly terms, but that is, I understand, one of the reasons that Burley Estates want to go down to Westminster. Because we're not looking at just this development, we've got to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, but surely,
That we want to get traffic out of Stamford and not have it all come onto the A1.
it's a bit like the M25. When they built that, they said, oh, it'd be great when it's 6 lanes. But as soon as they built it, they realised they needed 10.
Yeah.
So, why don't you just take all these roads, all these developers, let's not forget, 2,000 houses, so 60% of people in Stamford work in Peterborough, and 2,000 houses, there'll be a similar percentage going to go, as it stands, as apparently it's not chosen yet, Sydney Park Lane. they're all going to be going down there, or the quickest way they can to access the
A car driver, and we all car drivers always
will
take the
go
shortest route.
right?
Absolutely.
So why don't we future-proof it instead of, because somebody has actually mentioned on the from the Royal Road through the back to Casterton, that already there's some trees being knocked down. So let's not be plan. So if there's no plan, how come there's trees being taken out already?
Well, I'm not aware of it. I'm not aware of that.
So let's go back to the original point.
Yeah.
Why don't you future-proof it and send it right outside of Stamford so it doesn't encroach on Stamford, because it's going to grow even more. You're on about future-proofing things.
Well,
get it out of the way.
the problem is, for the last 30, 40 years, there's been no planning in Stamford, as was said earlier. Somebody's got a bit of land, they can get 200 houses on it, they can make a few bob. Let's be honest about it.
Let's go a bit bigger.
Well, a bit bigger than that, yeah. They can make a bit of money, and that's what's happened. And it's happened time after time after time, and Rutland Heights is a perfect example.
So start getting these people who build the houses.
But we can't turn the clock back and get these developers that have now disappeared to put their hand in the pocket.
No, we're not asking you to. What we're asking you to do is the people that are going to be building these 2,000 houses need to say, well, you're not having plans until you
But I mentioned this National Planning Policy Framework, which is a guideline, which is a government guideline that dictates all that, and that will dictate the amount of money that comes forward. And one of the objections that I have with it is if you, everybody keeps saying they want affordable housing. With affordable housing, you don't pay so much money into the pot for infrastructure.
Well, down in Rutland, didn't they? Down in Rutland, they said, I think it's David Wilson, they said, tell you what, yeah, you can have your planning, you can build your estate, you've got to have affordable housing on it. And they said, and if you don't build the affordable housing, you've got to pay a fee.
Yeah.
So they said, yeah, all right. But what Rutland District Council didn't do is say when they have to pay it. So, I don't know whether it's been...
Well, it's a contractual thing, it's a legal thing, 106 monies is, but we are behind the curve because it's been neglected in Stamford for years. Remember the old brickyards? I remember having a conversation in 2005 with the divisional highway manager and saying that road that goes through there is a joke, goes through Orders Place, and it's as dangerous a road as there is in the town, because children are going to school and cars share the same bit of road, right?